Project 2025 hires, Incompetence, Criminals, and Un-American.
This is a short video response to one of Project 2025's training videos, the one that features the Vice President of Hillsdale College, an expressly conservative college, meaning that it refuses to teach anything aside from what it views as conservative values. In other words, they are an ideologically driven college, not a university devoted to knowledge as such. Folks ought understand Hillsdale College as being little more than an extension of a political ideology. Due to this, it is not surprising that the speaker in the training video expresses views that are not particularly well thought out, or representative of anything that folks in universities not so ideologically driven would much recognize as being, shall we say fully aware. I'm just going to point to a few things the speaker is saying, which are not particularly novel things for someone to say, even an intellectual to say, but are exceedingly well understood as being incorrect. 1. The speaker here is making an argument that there is a division between what the American founders believed and what progressivism is. The speaker makes the distinction along nationalistic grounds, as in, there is the American way, our way, and then there is that foreign icky way, from Europe, called progressivism. Folks have got to understand that this is a silly distinction for a variety of reasons, among them being that I don't think he is well defining or grasping at what either progressivism or conservatism is, their origins and meanings. But here, without really criticizing any of his takes on those things, we can just debunk the whole position by noting that what he is calling as stemming from the founders is exactly stemming from those same icky foreign ways, from Europe. I mean to say here bluntly that the speaker's mode of framing this as if there is Americanism, based on the founders, and then there is that icky European progressivism is literally nothing but bullshit, and it is bullshit that his entire belief system is attempting to ground itself on. The argument is exactly just that there is the American way and then there is that other shit. Without really criticizing the details, the founders of America exactly predicated their beliefs upon highbrow European philosophy, just like he is claiming the progressivists are doing. The very things the speaker is calling as American, his very views, are stemming directly from exactly icky European philosophy. John Locke was European after all, and that is the philosopher to which the speaker is largely referring to when he is speaking of to whom the founders' views were based on. Moreover, Locke was profoundly influential in Europe. He is a thoroughly European thinker. So taking him at his word, the speaker, the Vice President of Hillsdale College, is just an idiot. 2. Next, I want to approach this from a more intellectual perspective, and criticize his specific claims on this point, rather than the silliness of them. As is oft the case, but not always, we're going to find out that he is projecting. He is holding that there is a natural or God-given right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I don't want to perjure the point, I merely want to clearly state that that tradition of the view of where right stems from is exactly European in origin, as in, it is argued for by European philosophers, the arguments are developed by Europeans, within a tradition that oft is in communication with the monotheistic faiths, trying to reconcile them, and so on. It is a distinctly European, not American, sort of thing. Folks such as the speaker tend to make this mistake because they themselves identify with European, and view any non-Europeans as being un-American. It is a mistake that is as a matter of identity, a categorical error in thinking, whereby they are conflating Europeanism with Americanism, and simultaneously holding that anything else is Europeanism except themselves. This is common enough because logically anything can follow from a logical fallacy, and these folks are predicating their entire belief systems upon a logical fallacy. Hence, they come to hold any number of entirely absurd positions. Progressivism, however, is exactly American in its origins. Meaning that its beliefs are predicated not upon Europeans per se, or anyone from outside of America, but rather, are outgrowths of the distinctly multicultural reality, capitalistic reality, and pragmatic reality of America. Warts and all. Much of what the Europeans who championed progressivism used was exactly what was going on in America at the time, and to a lesser extent what was going on in France, e.g. the democratic revolutions, and the linkages between democracies, scientific reasoning, economic understandings, new philosophical ethical reasonings, and understandings of the aptly named American pragmatism. I'd note too that these notions were also held by the founders, as they are not actually in conflict with each other, though for the founders many of these notions would have been in their infancy. While American pragmatism as a movement wasn't around during the founding of America, it has its roots in the progressivism that was, and it is no coincidence that American pragmatism comes to fruition during what is also known as the progressive era, e.g. the late 19th and early 20th century. The point here being that movement is exactly distinctly American, and runs counter to what was exactly not distinctly American, the very views that Project 2025 holds. Fundamentally progressivism is the belief that we can know answers to things, become experts at things, that the world is not hopelessly mysterious to the human mind, and that through human knowledge we can make better decisions which ought thereby be pragmatically applied by way of government, be that governing body on a local or larger scale, as appropriate. These are all well represented already within the founders' beliefs, but they are fairly well nascent in their form. Keep in mind that the scientific revolution was underway at this time, and would have been taking root in America and elsewhere in earnest. That particular movement was also well represented in the founders of America. The main point here being that the speaker's foundational argument is just false. Progressivism was around since the founding of America, just as it was elsewhere in the world. It took on a powerful form later in American history, again not coincidentally in the late 19th and early 20th century, as during that time there were particularly profound shifts in exactly scientific knowledge, inventions, economic theory, and ethical concerns, such as post-slavery reality, and universal suffrage movements. 3. The speaker tries to make a connection of an ideology to the administrative state, as in, there are specific ideological commitments that have infiltrated the administrative state. This is iffy at best. I'd say the speaker misunderstands progressivism and conservatism, each of which hold that the government ought actually be effective and that efficacy stems in no small part by way of the experts tasked with carrying out the laws. The main difference therein being the scale of involvement of the government, not its efficacy per se, noting that in practice that kind of debate is meant to swing between the views, as in some cases a larger scalar government is warranted, and in other cases a smaller scalar government is warranted. This aspect isn't particularly new either, as far as I know. Government doesn't task morons and incompetent folks with executing the laws. Unless of course you're a Project 2025 hire, in which case being incompetent and moronic is the entire aim. But to the point, the notion that the administrative state is ideologically driven is at least mostly false. Here I mean both that what folks may take as ideology, say, environmentalism, is really just boring fact, hence there isn't really an ideology in play there. There might be ideologies as to how to deal with those facts, but environmentalism isn't actually an ideology anymore at any rate. Its factualness isn't really in question, but also folks within the administration are bound towards the fulfillment of the administration's ideology. The administrative state is tasked to carry out the administration's will regarding thus and such, within the limits of expertise. Otherwise we are just speaking of incompetence. More broadly, the speaker is mistaking political commitments with ideological ones. The experts tasked with carrying out some ideological commitment is a political commitment on their part. They have political commitments to carry out the ideological ones that the administration brings with them. Within the limits of expertise. Expertise in a matter, however, is exactly not an ideological commitment. Though I do admit that it is possible to conflate these, as I think the speaker here exactly does that as a means of trying to justify their own position, and as noted in the intro, this is what Hillsdale College expressly does. This ought be clear too, as historically the various administrative elements have exactly bent to the ideological will of those in political power. They are bound to constrain predicated upon expertise, and they are bound to not do illegal activities, but ultimately they are tasked to carry forth the political will that is elected. Here we can, I think, plainly see that the only plausible aspect to which the Project 2025 folks could be referring to when they refer to the administrative state is that of expertise and competence. That is, Project 2025 seeks to have exactly non-experts and incompetence reign in the government. If somehow this isn't clear, consider the limitations regarding a given technology, say, car tech. The person at the head might task the engineers towards doing something that simply cannot be done. So they, the experts, push back and say, look, I know what you're going for here, but we can't really do that for this and that reason, we could possibly do thus and such, which is kinda like what you are going for. That constraint on the political will is the constraints of expertise. To not accept that is to merely hold to a desire to do poorly, a desire to hire incompetence, a desire to lead by way of stupidity, to force a something without care of even if it is possible, let alone to the efficacy of doing so. And understand that these experts are bound to actually try or do nonetheless. If the head of the car tech insists on trying the impossible, the engineers are bound to nonetheless try, though I'd assume they do so in a demoralized manner, it being impossible after all. There is a further limitation to that, they are not bound to try if what is proposed is actually illegal. That is the only other thing a 2025 hire could be pointing towards, e.g. they want to do illegal things, and are upset that folks wouldn't be bound to simply carry them out. 4. On the pragmatics of it all, the notion of replacing competence with political appointees is the actually ideologically driven and politically driven notion here. Note that a political party is tasked with not being incompetent. An incompetent political party, that is, a party that seeks towards incompetence, is not a valid political party. Project 2025 hires are indicative of this kind of incompetence. In conclusion, Project 2025 argues for incompetence in government as a norm, and ineffectualness of the exercise of people's political freedom of expression as an aim. They misunderstand the conservative interest in small government, local government, for that of incompetent government and centralized fascistic government. Project 2025 hires are people hired expressly for their incompetence, their willingness to do illegal things, and their inability to comprehend the expertise that constrains the actions of any political will whatsoever. If I were being generous in my interpretations of Project 2025, they are representing a notion of government that predates American government. They seek towards the divine rights of kings, queens, and aristocracies, that hold to no constraints, whereby the queens will be done regardless of either its legality, wisdom, or efficacy, and death be dealt to those who might show that the ruler's will was incompetent. If folks were to look back at the founders of America, those are the kinds of notions that they argued against, whilst also acknowledging that there is a something to the role of a leader to provide guidance and direction. Project 2025 hires, however, would know no such constraints. The speaker in the Project 2025 training video is, in a sense, not entirely wrong in their characterization of the founders. He is pointing to a something within their discourses and aims that was really there, but his presentation of it is exceedingly flawed, one-sided, and misses much of the main thrusts that the founders were so busy thrusting on about. E.g., they were exactly arguing against what Project 2025 is presenting, and making allowances for those kinds of things as they could. Among the founders' main, and at the time highly controversial points, was that the will of rulers, even the political will of rulers, had to be constrained by that of knowledge, wisdom, scientific fact, and ethics. Project 2025 is in that sense an entirely un-American enterprise.